This is Sporting Life.
Welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. David Orr, joined by Ed Chamberlain, Graham Cunningham, David Johnson and Billy Nash. We're going to look at some of the festival bankers later on. Yay or nay, are we for or against some of the shorties ahead of the great meeting, which is edging ever closer? And Ed, it must be edging ever closer because we had Nicky Henderson, Racecourse Gallop at Kempton, Constitution Hill went, there were tears again, but this time tears of joy.
Thank goodness. It was quite amusing. I'm not sure Hendo meant to let it slip, did he, that it was going to be in public? I did chuckle. I just wonder whether that was planned or unplanned. I must admit, I breathed a huge sigh of relief and moved on pretty quickly. A lot of people roll their eyes at it, but he is such an important horse for the week, Audie, from an ITV point of view. He, no offence to Galopin Des Champs, who we see once a year, but he is the box office horse of the week, Constitution Hill. Even though Galopin Des Champs going for Cheltenham Immortality on the Friday, Constitution Hill being there is so important on the Tuesday. And if he wins, there will be tremendous scenes. But let's hope everything goes smoothly between now and then, and we can move on from Tuesday. Thank goodness it was okay.
David, it did strike me, David, that you thought of everything that's happened at the Racecourse Gallants in the past, that Nicky would just take him at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning, shrouded by darkness, ask him to flick on the floodlights, and nobody would be any the wiser. Were you surprised that it was done with such a fanfare again?
Well, I think that was what he suggested was going to be the plan, but when you paid a handy fee by a bookmaker that want to dress you up in a nice gilet and put all the things on the jockeys as well, I think maybe that might have been a factor in why it was as public as what it was, because, in terms of what he did, it was literally just a piece of work that he could have done at home, couldn't he? The horse he was working with, only like 125 rated horses. So, they'll be pleased with what he did. He came out of it absolutely as they would have wanted to, but we still haven't learned anything, and it's continuing that theme that GC has been saying. So much of this champion hurdle, it is all about on perception and what we feel rather than what we actually know. So it is pretty close to the time that the talking has to stop. We're not quite there yet, but it is obviously a race that we must all be looking forward to.
See, I was at Cheltenham yesterday, GC. I was marking the ground. I thought the statue might go after your one-man protest was stopped in that last week's festival file. Are you still happy for them to just get it ready just in case?
Yeah, morning all. It's an exciting time. A bit of breaking news, first of all, I think we're in for a spring ground festival, chaps. In the weather forecast.
Yeah.
Really
it's
good.
A big change.
Mind you, I'm not far from there now, GC, and it's absolutely lagging it down.
Is it? Okay, but if you look for the 10 days, 11 days, it's very promising. So keep that in mind. Yes, Nicky, I wrote that piece just before I got on a plane on Thursday. All is forgiven, you've got to get behind the Hendo bandwagon again, the Golden Autumn, the Hall of Fame career. Then straight away, he pulled out the Lamber and Palladium from the Adonis and went for a Racecourse Gallop instead. So it's still, it's still in the back pocket, the old statue campaign. But at Constitution Hill, it's very encouraging that, they seem extremely polished now. So that has me thinking they might have him back to the level he was 2 years ago. I'm not going to say he's as good as he was 3 years ago when he put up that all-time performance in the Supreme Novices. But remember a couple of things. His backside was cracked 4 times for the first time ever. First time he'd ever felt the whip on the run-in the Christmas hurdle. Now he's been up for a long time. 2 more things. He has had wind surgery, and he had a little colic scare. So it's not been completely smooth sailing over a lengthy period for that horse. And as David says, I'm quite prepared to see Constitution Hill beat this lot, but I'm not quite sure that he's the horse he used to be. Time will tell.
Just on the statue, Audie, I don't know whether you've seen the spot. I've spoken to the chairman, and it's got to be a spot where he's looking GC in the eye when he's on racing TV.
There'll be one. No.
He's going to be in the corner of where the also ran finish, so he's absolutely staring at GC.
You'd have to look hard to find that spot. If I drop any further down that batting order, I'll be bringing the drinks out.
Billy, we still don't know whether Brighter Days Ahead is going to be in there against Country Tuesday. Exchange Market, she's short enough, solid enough for the champion hurdle. We're waiting for that white smoke, but it could be imminent. The decision is expected this week.
So I does, but if GC's bespoke weather forecast is correct, I think they might have another rethink, because if it is a spring ground festival, if it is quick ground, I think she'll definitely go for the mare's hurdle. I'm still not convinced she'll run the champion hurdle, but I think heavy ground, or at least on the significant amount of soft in it, would possibly sway them in that direction. But if it's a spring ground festival, I think she'll definitely turn up in the mare's hurdle.
Well, it's not been the perfect week for Nick Henderson, despite the hugs and kisses. We've lost his second jockey, James Bowen, for the festival. He'd have presumed been riding Palladium in the JTB Tri-Hurdle. Rick Ban, a story that's always bubbling away. What was your reaction when you read the story that he's missing the Cheltenham Festival?
Is that for me, Audie?
That's for you, Ed. Sorry,
what a shame. He's such a nice lad. I feel for him. I really feel for him. And he was going to get some absolute gem rides as well. But Nicky Henderson summed it up. Here we are again. Those rules are the rules, and he screwed up. But the human in me feels very sorry for him. He's such a good lad, having another good season, and this will really, really hurt.
Yes, we won't revisit the whip. We said we wouldn't, but I'm sure it could well be back in the weeks to come. Billy, let's talk about a couple of news lines out of Ireland. Michael Hourigan announces retirement. I mean, he's been a character and a big figure in Irish jumps racing for some time.
Certainly has been, yeah. He's held the licence for as long as I can remember, Audie. I heard him saying during the week that he's been in racing since he was 14. He's into his 70s now, so he's had a long, illustrious career in racing. I suppose he's best known for his two best horses. Certainly were Dornan's Pride and Beaver Salmon. And I must admit, I did a double take yesterday when I read that between them they had won over 50 races. I had to look it up, and yeah, absolutely. Dornan's Pride ran 70 times under rules, and he won 29. That's bumpers and the flat, over fences and hurdles. And he also won all 4 starts in Point to Points. And I think possibly a charity race as well thrown into the mix. And Beaver Salmon won 19 of his 51 runs under rules. Also won a point. But look, Michael Hourigan has been synonymous with jump racing and point-to-point racing in particular in Ireland for a long, long time. I suppose he was one of the kingpins of the point-to-point scene when it wasn't as sexy as it is now, for want of a better word. He was always producing top point-to-point horses. He's put a lot of good horses through his hands. The likes of Amberley House, a Grand National winner, started off with Michael Hourigan in point-to-points. He also put a lot of very good jockeys through his hands. Adrian Maguire in particular is one that stands out. Would have ridden buckets of winners for him in point-to-points before he got his big break. The likes of Norman Williamson, in more recent times Gavin Sheehan, and as well as his own sons Michael and Paul. So yeah, he's had a long career. I'm sure he won't be lost to the sport. I'm sure he'll still be sticking around because his daughter Laura still holds a licence. But a tough taskmaster in his time. To like I said, he wasn't afraid to run his horses. But he's certainly earned his retirement now. So the best wishes to him.
Full of wonderful horses who train. There's staggering stats about career runs and wins as well. David, sad news from Ireland as well. We lost Delta Work, who was such a staple of the major spring festivals in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of go back at his peak, he was a winner of Savills and Irish Gold Cup. I think he's sort of like 5-1 for the Gold Cup one year as well. So at one stage, he was one of the best chasers in Ireland, and obviously as he's got older he didn't quite have the ability he did have, but he had that sort of second career, a bit of a renaissance, didn't he? Reinvented as a cross-country chaser and Grand National horse, and 2 wins at the festival in the cross countries, twice placed in the Grand National, and from what we saw in that run at Cheltenham in January, he still had something to offer and was going to make a decent fist of another bid in the National, I think. So, yeah, it's always a shame when horses that have done what he had done, do sort of go out in the way that he has. So, yeah, it's a shame, but commiserations to Connections.
Remember the day when those Herberts at Cheltenham, in a small number, booed him because he beat Tiger Roll in the cross-country? That was a pretty low point for the Cheltenham crowd, wasn't it?
I think I might have been one of them.
Yeah, not their finest hour. Good news for Shark Hanlon, Billy. The second part of the ban has been suspended. He is back with a licence in time for Cheltenham.
Yes, the Shark is back, no doubt rejuvenated after his break, and I'm sure has done some restocking in his time off. Back for Cheltenham. I don't know if he's going to have many or any runners at Cheltenham. I think Hewick is being prepared for the Grand National. Obviously, Tara Lee Cogan has been keeping the seat warm, so to speak, for the Shark while he was absent. She hasn't trained a winner in that time, but she's had a couple of placed horses, but the Shark wasn't exactly flying before she took over. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure he'll be in larger than life as ever. But yeah, he'll be a welcome presence back on the racecourses anyway, Ardy.
It's amazing how the Trump style has spread throughout the world now. And in the news piece in the Racing Post today, the old Super Shark says, the only good thing to come out of this is that pretty much the whole world was behind me. So I'm really hoping we have plenty of support when we come back.
Welcome back, Jack. In case you're listening. Let's move on. What we're going to do next, Bobby Joe, Billy. I was worried. I was at the Randolph Square National Weights Lunch, which Ed hosts. I was worried about the lack of depth in the Irish Challenge this year. I was delighted, therefore, to see Nick Rockett go single-figure prize for Willie Mullins, having won the Bobby Joe, beating Intense Raffle, clearly two leading contenders. But now I am Maximus. Would that be a concern for you as part of his entry prep?
It was a pity. It would have been great to see him, but I think it's only a minor infection, I think, was why he was pulled out. Willie didn't seem to be too concerned about it, so hopefully it's all systems go with him. And he was making the point that maybe, a slog on heavy ground at Fairyhouse, it mightn't have been a bad thing that he missed it. But the race itself, it went to Nick Rockett, who was fully entitled to win, the conditions of the race were absolutely in his favour. If it had been a handicap, he'd have had to give £10 to Intense Raffles. As it turned out, he was getting 3. So, he didn't need to improve. He didn't need to be at his best to follow up his Thyestes win. Intense Raffles is the horse that comes out of the race with plenty of credit, much more like the horse we saw last year. Obviously, the couple of runs he'd had over hurdles have done what they were supposed to do, and he seems to be reaching a peak at the right time. So, if you fancied him for entry, you'd have been quite happy with what you saw there. Capadano and Manila Cocooner, third and fourth, are also entry possibles. Capadano was a better run from him, but can he reproduce it in a more competitive field? You'd be concerned about that. And Manila Cocooner, slightly disappointed with him on the day, but still, I think with entry in mind, not a bad run. I think more of a stamina test on drier ground is going to suit him a lot better. So I certainly wouldn't rule him out of the national reckoning just yet.
I was worried about the Irish Grand National team. Their bumper horses I was in a blind panic about. But Willie Mullins has somehow found in recent weeks 2 horses that have catapulted themselves to the head of the betting for the Weatherby's champion bumper. Ed Cambridge, does it not sum up the challenge, though, that's currently facing British racing? That one's owned by Ed Ware, and the other one that's come out and won at the weekend, Game of Inches, Professor Caroline Tisdall, is it? Who's got the horses with David Pipe. She's had horses in England all the time. Her and Brian Drew go to Ireland, they go to Willie Mullins, they open their checkbooks and they get Final Demand and Game of Inches. Horses that any trainer in England would get their high teeth for.
There you go, yeah. We've talked about it, haven't we, endlessly over the last few years. The British owners sending their horses to Ireland. It's like, oh my God. I mean, when Final Demand won at the Dublin Racing Festival, just days after Brian Drew said what he did about where he wanted his horses, like, oh God, things will change, but it's not going to change in the short term. And that horse is a massive player in the bumper. That'll come plenty quick enough for what is he's big, isn't he? He's big and raw. And Ruby's got an unbelievable record in it. I did the one Cheltenham preview I do representing Wellchild Audi, and Ruby tipped up Coca Cabana. So read into that what you will, and be fascinating who Patrick chooses. Maybe we'll get the exclusive on that next week, Audie.
We will get the exclusive on that next week, otherwise you won't be able to leave the arena. No, it'd be interesting to see how he pulls that back.
In fact, Ardy, Willie Mullins has a third string to his Cheltenham bow in recent times, because he has acquired Aquaforce, a horse we spoke about on the podcast here last week or the week before. A very wide margin winner of the Mayor's Bumper at Gordon, trained by Michael Gunn, has now been bought by a certain JP McManus and has joined the Closutton team. So there's another one to add to the list.
This is the greatest game. I was at Paul Nichols' on Monday, talking about the recruitment process and trying to get the horses. And you haven't got a prayer, have they? They haven't got a chance of getting their hands on these horses right now. It's just not even on the radar. But we'll come to Paul Nichols in a short while. We're going to get to him via the Saudi Cup, though, GC. You were out there.
What a race.
At the weekend. What a race. I mean, that was it. And what a story it almost was.
Absolutely. It was a fantastic story anyway. Now, I'm very familiar that it's Cheltenham coming up and get out of the way. People's mentality is Cheltenham all in. But that was a spectacular race. It was the most accomplished turf horse in the world over the last 18 months or so. Romantic Warrior, the real up-and-comer from Japan, a real dirt specialist, Forever Young, and a hell of a duel all the way up the long straight in Saudi. $20 million on the line, and it might have been slightly different had James McDonald just checked for a minute. And there's lots of debate about that. But either way, I think both horses enhanced their reputations. And I think it lit the blue touch paper for the 2025 flat season. We all know that last year had its highs, but they weren't Everest-type highs. And I think David and Billy can confirm this. The ratings allotted to both Forever Young and Romantic Warrior, 131 and 129 on time form, they stack up extremely well with anything that any horse achieved on any surface in 2024. So it looks like we might be in for some fireworks on the flat this year, which is great.
Look at you excited, DJ. Type flat editor, just around the corner. Did you find me these international races? They're definitely growing, aren't they, through the winter months? They're getting more focus, more attention.
They are, yeah. And I mean, with the money that they're going to put up, that's going to continue. I really think that. And I mean, Forever Young, he's sort of been a bit of a slow burner, hasn't he? Obviously, initially came to prominence this time last year when he won out in the Saudi Derby, followed up in Dubai and ran a belter out in the Kentucky Derby as well. And obviously not beaten far in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And he does look like he's come back even better this year. And Romantic Warrior, you know, what can you say about him that hasn't been said before? And think of all the column inches that were wasted on City of Troy last year, talking about whether he could be the same force on dirt as what he was on turf. Well, this fella's just gone and done it and shown he's exactly as good. And on a different day, maybe he might even have won. You know, don't want to criticise his rider because he didn't really do anything wrong, but you do just wonder if he had delayed it a little, he just might have gone a little bit too far clear and not been able to have reeled him back. And just a bit of a shame that they're not going to rematch again in Dubai. I think Romantic Warrior is going to come back on the turf, and Forever Young obviously going to go for the Dubai World Cup. But a rematch between the two somewhere would be, really something to savour.
It does show you that.
Quick hat tip for David O'Mara, who spotted the extremely valuable prize when he first in Dubai and then in Saudi. He didn't win Epic Poet. I tipped him up as a good value option last week. He was a bit unlucky not to win. He didn't get the breaks at the right time. Rashid Murphy jammed him in. But for finishing second in a handicap, chaps, Epic Poet, who's a good horse, but he's not a star, trousered 400,000 sterling. 400,000. So, you know, the enterprising trainers like O'Mara will continue to spot those openings. It was a great weekend, but it's Cheltenham. I will get out of the way again, Dave.
No, but when you talk about that, you talk about that kind of money that David O'Mara's won, GC, it just shows you the challenge we've got over here.
Yeah.
You think of races like the King George and the Judbon International with all their ambition, and then you see what happens in Saudi and the money on offer in Dubai coming up. They've got their work cut out because the history and prestige of those races can only get you so far. And you can see what Nick Smith is thinking with that King George, that they're going to have eye-watering money soon to attract these horses, I think.
Let's go from the King George Ascot to Paul Nichols. Because as I said, Ed, I was there. You were on the podcast last week where we asked a question. GC posed it to the panel. It did.
I listened to it. Yeah. Well done,
was
Fran Berry. I like what GC wrote about Fran Berry as well.
Yeah.
Fran, that was very, very moving. You did so well.
A lovely tribute. So we were asked, would Nichols be champion again? It was almost after his media day. But the Nichols media days in the Corto Star Denman, it was incredible. That you couldn't get into the yard. There were tap-light trucks, but it was much lower queues you'd expect on Monday. But Paul made the point. He made the point that he's got the same strike rate as Dan Skelton this year. He's ticking over at 19%. He's got nearly £2 million. Glint in the eye. If I win the National, I'm giving it one hell of a go. You never know. He's got one haymaker up his sleeve. But what struck me, Ed, of all the moments at the Cheltenham Festival that you could just envisage, all the furore around Nichols, etc., Caldwell Potter wins a new Novice handicap chase. He's ear to the crowd, he's silenced the doubters.
Harvey Smith.
Yeah, Smith all in one hit. What a moment that could be.
I tell you what I enjoyed, though. Cunningham against Brocklebank. It was fantastic. Head to head over Nichols. It was like Cunningham against Johnson all over again. I loved it.
And then Rubo came out. Rubo came out and won the big race. But the Caldwell Potter, I think the weather forecast might be against him. But what a scene if he were to win at the Cheltenham Festival. And
brilliant.
After he came out and got beat at Windsor, Paul Nichols, came straight out and said, "Well, a horse like this gets beat." Immediately, people on Twitter come out and say, "What a load of shit." But they don't know what they're on about.
I think some of them will do okay, the Caliph de Burles, because some of them haven't been quite right at Nichols's. I think he might pull out a few, but you look at the others and the Mullins firepower and you see how far he is behind. I like his horse in the bumper. We talked about the Mullins horses. That's one of the stories of the week, the Barber horse that they share with the McNeils. No drama this end. Love that to run well in the bumper. But he's got his work cut out, Audie. But sport changes very, very quickly. It wasn't so long ago that Barcelona were unbeatable. And, things do, exactly. Things do change. And so it's not going to happen in the immediate future, but with his hunger, don't rule him out.
I was going to say, ask Paul, I wanted to get the line. It's not a free hit for you this year. You've gone in white hot heat in the past. You're going to enjoy the fact there's no pressure. And you could just tell he hates the fact there's no pressure. He thrived on those moments. He's much rather
he doesn't go on the odd day. If he's not got a proper chance, he doesn't go, does he?
No. You could see why you'd missed it, wouldn't you? That adrenaline, that buzz, that fear, whatever it is you've got on those days, he thrived on it. Now, talking about adrenaline, fear, and thriving under pressure, Billy Nash, the Cheltenham Festival handicap weights revealed yesterday, a lavish ceremony. A lovely bowl of local venison was offered to the hard-working media who covered the event. Last week, we wanted 60 Irish handicappers to follow from you. I've cut it down to 30. You've got half an hour now, Billy. No, Billy Nash, you're going to be first. Give us a handicapper who's on your radar for the Fez.
There are a couple, Ardy, I'd have to say.
There you go.
Looking at the weights yesterday, I'm kind of gone half blind from looking at these weights yesterday and trying to pick out what I think is well handicapped and what isn't. There were a couple that stood out to me. I've been keeping an eye on what sort of a Mark Lark in the morning would get for the county hurdle. He's in off 132, which is only £10 higher than he won the Fred Winter last year, and I think he's been, let's say, minded for this race, so he's still on my radar. As is another Joseph O'Brien horse in the Jack Richards Nürburgring, who, if you look at his chase form, is not well handicapped at all. But he's got a mark of 142. He won a Galway hurdle off 139 over hurdles. You'd have to think that this has been the long-term plan with Nürburgring. So, judged on that, I think he's potentially nicely treated in that race. I think our chasers are probably better off than the hurdlers in a lot of races. That seems to be the case. That tends to be the case most years when you look at the weights, that the hurdlers are being do look to be better off, or the chasers do look to be better off than some of the hurdlers. I think a couple of Gordon Elliott horses in the plate, Firefox and Touch Me Not, if he was to run them there rather than the Arkle, would be very interesting. But I'm going to give you one dark one for the Martin Pipe, Ardy. Henry de Brom had a horse finish second in the race last year, got Waterford Whispers for JP. He's got a very similar type this year called Raglan Road, who gets in off a mark of 129. He won a maiden hurdle last year. He's only had one run this year, but he's shaped very much like a horse that was going to come on from it. I think he's been put aside with this race in mind. A mark of 129 looks perfectly fair to me. And if he got into the Martin Pipe off that, he'd certainly be on my shortlist. But the one other horse that did catch my attention, who is not now trained in Ireland for the county hurdle, is Petrolhead. Remember Petrolhead? The horse that was not allowed run in the Galway hurdle when trained by Katie Brown, has now joined, obviously he's synonymous with Ronan McNally, who used to train him in the past. He's now joined Neil Mulholland. So wouldn't that be interesting if Petrolhead turned up and won the county hurdle? Interesting interview for you there, Ed.
Thanks. Yeah, look forward to that one.
Billy, can I ask you a quick question on this subject? It's a more general subject, and it's a quote from yesterday's event. Martin Greenwood, former time form, colleague of various people here, now the key handicapper over jumps for the BHA. He's talking about Now Is the Hour, who seems to have been prepped quite nicely for the National Hunt Chase by Gavin Cromwell. And Martin's talking about this horse, and says, "Now is the hour is the most interesting horse in the National Hunt Chase," said Greenwood. There was a bit of controversy in that last run, which caught the eye of a lot of people. Personally, if that's the only Irish race you've ever watched and you thought there was a problem with the running and riding, then you don't watch enough Irish racing. What's he suggesting?
Well, I thought the interesting part, and you didn't, there was a little snippet of that quote as well, GC, where he said some people suggested he shouldn't give the horse a mark. Now, I'd love to know who these people were that they said he shouldn't get a mark for after the run the last time, because he quite clearly, he was, that was his fourth start over fences at Navan the last day, so he was entitled to a mark anyway. And it just goes to show how bizarre these new rules are, because I mean, he could have run over fences. He could have got a handicap mark over fences in Ireland without running over fences. He's entitled to run a handicap chase in Ireland off his hurdles mark if Gavin wanted to do that. But the fact that some people are suggesting that Martin Greenwood shouldn't give him a handicap mark just because they thought he was considerately handled the last day, I think is absolutely bizarre altogether.
Also worth mentioning, that horse looks a proper mudlark as well.
All his form is on, he's only ever run once on good ground, and all his best form is on soft, heavy ground, yeah. So that is worth bearing in mind.
Do you know what? In terms of the Presbyterian Cup, Cheltenham should just let this dry out, shouldn't they? Don't put any water on. If we've got a drought, let's have a good to firm in places festival. It's coming home, lads. It's coming home. We will have it.
Records broken all over the show.
Yeah, we'll have
Bill
it.
Tuffnell's in John Pullen's ear, I bet you.
Oh,
What
a day to be like. Well, the biggest prize winner of the day, Billy having a British handicap to follow at the festival. DJ, what was on your radar for the festival handicaps?
I'd be lying if I said I went through them with the fine-tooth comb that Billy appears to have done. But just when we were talking about Paul Nichols, the mark for Ginny's Destiny is beginning to look pretty damn appealing now. I think he's down to 149. But when you think he was 3-1 fab for the Paddy Power off 155, there's certainly room for manoeuvre there. And just GC talking about the ground potentially being on the quicker side, or at least not sort of really testing, I think that might be in his favour. And I think if he was 16-1 for the place or something on the day, I'd find it pretty difficult not to keep him on side. But this, in my opinion, this isn't the time to be betting in the handicaps. Let's wait for the day. The races, they're just priced so uncompetitive at the moment. You've only got the standard each way terms as well. So just be patient, I think, would be my take from what we've seen over the last couple of days.
You know what, DJ, you couldn't for John Joe O'Neill. We had a media visit there yesterday doing the press huddle, and every single horse, he had no opinion where it was running, nearer the time. The stable tour never appeared. There was literally not a single running plan for any horse in place, which sort of makes sense. GC, I know it's not the time to bet, but is there a horse on your radar in the Fez handicaps?
It's not a dark one, Dave, but I'll be really surprised if Stencil's not going to go really close in the Boodles Fred Winter Juvenile Handicap on day one. We'll come on to the horse who beat him, East India Doc, a bit later on perhaps, but I genuinely think that East India Doc is a very, very strong Triumph Hurdle contender. And although I think he was beaten 10 lengths in the end, in relation to the rest of a reasonable field, he just looked a useful horse. Now, we have to remember the same connections and owner, JP McManus, George and Zetterholm, gave us Milantino last year, who had finished third to Sagino on Burdett Road in the Triumph Hurdle trial. He went off, I think, 100-30 favourite, and he ran okay, but he wasn't quite good enough. I think Stencil is cut from an altogether more athletic, speedier, nimbler cloth. And I've had a look at I've not gone through all the field, but I'll be amazed if there are more than one or two horses who can cope with Stencil on day one.
Last but not least, Ed, anything on your radar?
I love Stencil, but I think I'd rather get the points out for him to win the Arkle next year, GC, than the Fred Winter this year. He is a chaser in making. He's a stunner, Stencil. Love him. I'm in the DJ camp of waiting. It looks so different on the day, and Skybet paying 16 places in some of these races. But Khalif de Burle is interesting in the Grand Annual. I mean, there's so many. Cargese in the County Hurdle. There are so many, Audie, but I will be sitting still until the day.
I got one of the greatest responses I've had to a question. I interviewed Michael Harris, the VHA hurdles, head of the hurdles team. And I spoke to him yesterday and said, how hard was it to come up with the mark for Kopek de Me, who was the big buzz horse? He said, very easy. You just timed the French rating by 2. I said, well, there you are. There's no, thank you. Move on. Next. So there you go. There was no.
Did you really get served venison?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
you
true?
could choose. You could choose what you had. There's little bowls available.
In a pie or just as a steak?
No, it was a sort of casserole, venison casserole that it was very nice, very tasty. Wasn't quite the glory years where you used to call the Cotswolds in the Edward Gillespie era. You'd have Cotswold food scattered around the room. You could take in the great gravy train's not what it used to be, which I'm sure will upset a lot of people. But we plunder on. We plundered on to the festival bankers. GT touched on this in last week's festival file. Don't forget, the latest one will be on Sporting Life this Saturday. For or against these good things, Billy, the vast majority of Irish, you'll be staggered to know, but there's the odd Brit one in there. I'm going to start, Billy, with you, with Kopek to board, because we're going to get this beat, aren't we? One piece of flimsy evidence at the DRF. It's a nay for you, isn't it, Billy?
It's a yay for me, or you'll be surprised to hear. And part of the reason is I'm not sure this is a very deep race. I don't particularly fancy Romeo Coolio. I think he's better than Salvatore Mundi. And even though William Money I thought was impressive the other day, I think from what I've seen, all the evidence would suggest Kopek de Board is the best horse in this race. So he's certainly a yay for me, Dave.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about William Money. That was a very different William Money we saw last week at Punchestown. Different jockey, much smoother jumping technique. And it looks like he's coming good at the right time, isn't it?
Tactics, I think, were probably the key. The day that Kawabunga, who unfortunately will miss the festival, beat him the time before, he went very hard from the front and couldn't quite last home, but they held him up the last day. And like you said, jumped a lot better. Another horse who I think possibly soft ground is important to him. He does seem to handle it really well. But yeah, that was an improved performance and he does seem to be coming right at the right time. So I wouldn't put anybody off him. He should be a nice price in that race.
Leave the taps off pulling, it's evidently clear. Can you see any weakness in the supreme favourite? You're taking him on?
Well, he's hot-headed, isn't he? So the prelims are going to be very, very interesting and see what they do. Might he wear a hood? I don't know. But I wouldn't be backing him now for so many different reasons, because he's going to be a bigger price on the day, for one. And two, I just want to see him before the race.
Yeah.
He didn't settle at the DRS and still won easily. I'm not sure he can get away with that in a race as good as the Supreme.
I think keep pulling like that in the medium term and you will run into problems somewhere, but his ability is tremendous. I think Work Ahead deserves a mention. Now, we haven't seen him since Christmas, and it was only, I think it was a maiden hurdle, but he beat William Money and he jumped really well. He jumped really well on the speed and he just looked a good athlete. So all these horses have a lot to find on form with Kopek de Me, but I think Work Ahead has that potential to take a big jump forward. De Board, not de Me. I'm getting my Kopeks mixed up already.
And talking of Durs, we need De Bromhead back in business, really, for the Fez.
Bit better signs, Billy, at the moment.
Yeah, they seem to be coming back into form. Certainly the green shoots are there, so I wouldn't be worried about that too much.
Good.
One thing, DJ, that struck me about Kopek de Board was the potential. He's free going, can take a chuck. So can Salvatore Mundi. I mean, I'd imagine, DJ, that the Mundi team might be slightly concerned that they could have two horses, two hurdles clear after the jump the third in the Supreme. One of them, they're going to have to get one of them to drop in.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember Dysart Dynamo in Constitution Hill's race? So it'd be interesting if we got something like that. But yeah, I've been really impressed with Kopek de Boards. Obviously, his jumping was a lot better, wasn't it, at Leopardstown in the Brave Inca? And that race is just such a good trial for the Cheltenham Novice Hurdles. I'd be very surprised if he's beaten, even accounting for his free-going nature.
I think that's improvement in Kopek de Board's jumping from start 1 to 2. I think that'll be reflected with Salvatore Mundi. The really good trainers, they tend to, to get that improvement when it matters most. So I wouldn't be worried about Salvatore Mundi's jumping. I'm just not quite sure how good a horse he is.
Another banker, another WP Mullins banker is Madra in sadly a Sergino-less Arkle. But Billy, I think it was you who said there's no way he wins an Arkle jumping like he did at the DRF. I'm sure it was you who said that.
I think you must have been mistaken, Pardon if it wasn't me. Again, for similar reasons to Kopek de Board, I'm just not convinced about the strength and depth of the opposition here. Lotus Sud is a very good horse, but I think Majborough has a bit more class than him, and provided his jumping holds up, and I thought he was fine at Leopardstown without being spectacular. I think he's the best horse in the race, and I wouldn't bet against him anyway.
EJ, are you going to take this one on?
I'm not inclined to. No, Lotus looks to be the pick of the British, and that form last time was at Warwick, wasn't it? Yeah, with the form, you could arguably say it was boosted at the weekend, but perhaps not that by that much. I'd just be very surprised. Majborough just looks a better horse, and his jumping is fine for me. I think he's going to be ridden in very straightforward fashion. He'll just go out similar to how we did in Ireland last time, and I think he'll be very hard to peg back.
It does strike me, GC, that they're excited by Mad with the Mullins team. He's one that really lights their fire. I don't think they know where his ceiling is, what his trip is, but they just know he's a pretty good racehorse in a very short space of time.
Possibly, yeah. He's come a long way in a short space of time. Gorgeous looking horse. But my two questions would be, are you likely to back Majborough 4-7? I think most people on this podcast would say no. And I'd extend it by saying, do you know anyone who's likely to punt him at 4-7? And I think most people would say, well, probably not. I think Lotus Sud is an interesting rival here. I agree with Billy that I don't think there's massive depth beyond the front 2 or 3 in the market. What I would like to see is for Harry Skelton to get into his ribs early on, Majborough's ribs, and make it a test of accurate jumping, because they're both forward-going horses. Lotus Sud, to me, I've been really impressed with his jumping, and the time form ratings are 159p Majborough, 156 pre-Lotus Sud. It's not really indicative of a 4-7 chance, but Majborough has all those ones against his name. So does Lotus Sud, 4 from 4 over fences. So at 4-7, and is it 9-2, 5-1 for looking? I think I would be tempted, because, you know, with Kopek aboard, with Final Demand, with Majborough, all horses have flaws. They all have flaws if you race them often enough, Dave. Coming in off 2 runs, you know, 2 runs. Oh, or is it 2 or 3 for Majborough over fences?
Just 2.
Just 2, you know, Kopek aboard, 2. Final Demand, 2. Keep racing them. They will show flaws. And if Harry Skelton makes it a real aggressive, you know, no holds barred test of jumping, I think Lotus Sud can give Majborough a right shake in 2 weeks.
You should make the point as well, just each way wise, that taking on these short price horses with the 3 places, mathematically, you're in a pretty good place regardless if you take them all on anyway. So
yeah, I should bring out that old stat though. It's only 3 years old, but in Grade 1s, Willie's had 14 runners at 6-4 or shorter. 12 of them, 12 won, and the other 2 were Gallopan when he tipped up at the last, when about to win by a street in the Turners, and the cement-footed El Fabiolo at 2-9 in last year's championship. So he doesn't miss many when they're tight in the Group 1s.
Oh, Ed, we're hoping Nicky doesn't miss with many. I mean, I know your portfolio's in shreds. You've lost Sergino. You cashed out on Lalamba. You're punting-wise, Ed Chamberlain. You're on your knees. Are you getting it all back? Are you walking up to the rails on the Tuesday to get it all back on Constitution Hill?
Absolutely hopeless. I am. Listen, he's the big horse of the week for me in my TV capacity, and I take on board everything GC said, but I've been a believer since day one. I've never doubted him. At Newbury, the day he worked with Sergino, as you know, Sergino was a flipping aeroplane. If he couldn't have beaten Majborough over 2 miles, I'd have given up the game, I think. And Constitution Hill that day was as fat as me at Newbury. Goes to Kempton in the paddock, and I'm still thinking he's fat. Not quite as fat as me, but he's still pretty fat. I know he needed those cracks, GC, but he was mightily impressive. And then you see him at Kempton, and he looks like freaking Constitution Hill again. He looks like a lean machine, and I'm a total believer. I've never doubted him. I think he's a freak. I know in normal years these mares getting £7 can be deadly, but Constitution Hill is something completely different, and I just cannot wait. They come down the hill. I hope Mark Johnson's on commentary for all my mates who are going, and Mark Johnson says Nico hasn't moved a muscle on Constitution Hill. The place will go absolutely ballistic. And what it was like with 20,000 people. Oh, it'd be magic. It'd be heaven. That's what my friends who are sports fans, that's what they love. I know racing people roll their eyes.
Yeah.
But that is the theatre of Cheltenham, and nothing beats it. Back in the day when anything Ruby was riding, when Ruby hadn't moved a muscle, the place just roared. It's theatre. That's what you've got to play to when you're the racecourse commentator. But Audie, you saw what it was like with 20,000 people there with Constitution Hill on Trials Day. Imagine what that's going to be like with 65,000 people. And I think he'll deliver. I'm a believer.
If he's put us 3-0 off, 4-0 up in the Presbyterian Cup as well and got to firm ground, the place will be absolutely, it'd be like Twickenham. There'll be all sorts of songs.
Break his own track record, the one he smashed 3 years ago on the Supreme Novices.
The setup could be there, couldn't it? If they run Brighter Days Ahead, she's got a pacemaker, the tank along. It's the same setup that he exploded off in the Supreme. But GC, you made the point a number of times. It's all about feel with this horse at the minute. The concrete evidence is thin on the ground.
The problem is it's all about feel with a few others. Do you feel that Brighter Days Ahead will run? Do you think that Lossiemouth will recover from a very, very heavy fall that she suffered at Leopardstown? And do you feel that State Man is fully over whatever ailed him at Christmas, because he was left with a walking day in the Irish Champion Hurdle? So it's a tremendous race. Have a look. For all that I'm sceptical about how to analyse, the Jolly, Constitution Hill, is 10 from 10. Brighter Days is 7 from 8 and should be 8 from 8. She got caught in a dawdle at last year's festival. State Man is 13 from 18 and Lossiemouth is 9 from 12. So it's a legitimately high-quality race, and it all depends, as David said, on how you feel about the favourite and one or two others. I think Gordon Elliott and Co might just delay this Brighter Days Ahead decision now and wait very carefully on the weather. I think Billy summed it up well there.
David, we spent two Cheltenhams ago, we were getting ready for the greatest hurdle ever. We had all the graphics ready. She was going to hit that go past night. He was going to go past night nurse, we're hoping, with Constitution Hill. This time around, are you happy to sit and watch?
Well, I mean, people who listen to the pod will know that I've already backed Brighter Days Ahead back, before she did what she did at Christmas, and remained hopeful that 14s, I think.
Well done.
So, if she doesn't run, it doesn't look quite so good, but
it's a great price on runner.
I think if she runs, she'll give him a real race, and I think she'll beat him. If she doesn't, I think Constitution Hill will beat the rest pretty easy. It's that straightforward as far as I'm concerned.
Nash, I want one word from you, Billy Nash. Yes or no, Constitution Hill?
Yes.
Gritted teeth.
Look at the pain.
I praised Van Berry earlier, Audie. I praised him because he was brilliant last week. Go back and listen to that twaddle he spoke before Christmas about Constitution Hill. I hope he's changed too.
I'm moving on to Final Demand now, Ed. And I've got to say thank you for everybody's messages. Because you mentioned that twaddle around Christmas, and we all give our horses for 2025 at the end of that. And I put up a horse called Willie Mullins, just won at Limerick, because I'd never heard Willie speak like it. But it was Final Demand.
Was that the same pod where I put up the Lambert, Audie?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yes, it was. Lambert was short enough, already on the radar. I put up Final Demand.
No one had ever heard of him.
It was. No, it was.
He was 33 to 1.
Final Demand was 33s for the Albert Bartlett and the Turners. I said I thought he was one of their A-listers. Again, thanks for the messages. I've received none. And I backed him for the Albert Bartlett. Which is
you're as bad as me.
Yeah, the cruelest of games. Billy Nash, Final Demand. Is there enough evidence to say he's a Turner's banker?
Possibly not enough to say he's a banker. Like everybody else, I was massively impressed by what I saw at Leopardstown. He really does look the real deal. I think he's going to be a tremendous chaser in 12 months' time. But unlike the Supreme, I think this is possibly a really competitive novice hurdle with the likes of the New Lion and Potter's Charm and a few more in there, a couple of other Irish ones as well. I won't be betting against Final Demand, but I certainly wouldn't be lumping into him at current odds. He may well win, Ardy. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he did. But I just think this is a very, very good race. And the fact that, like, the Nathaniel Lacey that he won has a terrible record of producing Cheltenham winners. The Shallow Hurdle that the New Lion won has a terrible record of producing Cheltenham winners. But something's got to give, and I'm just a little bit on the fence about him. I think he's a smashing prospect, but I'm not sure what I back him at those odds.
Billy, does the yellow clay go here, or will Will you go Albert Bartlett?
That's the plan, yeah. That's the plan. No, he's in the Albert Bartlett as well, but the original plan all along was to run this race.
It's terrible of me to be banging on about the ground at this point, but the yellow clay handled really deep ground when he won the Lawless of Naas. Final Demand clearly handles soft ground well. I would imagine that the new Lion, with that high cruising speed and that cat-like jumping, would be really nicely suited by spring conditions at Cheltenham. What do you think?
I would agree, yeah. Yeah. I think if of the three of them, certainly he'd be the one that would prefer drier ground, I think, definitely, yeah.
I'd agree as well, actually, Jason. The more I think about it, if it is like good ground, I'd look to stretch Final Demand out, I think. I think he might find the speed test at 2.5, 2. I'd roll, it's still in the Albert Bartlett, Willie. I think that there's a definite option there to go over the 3.
Could be rain by the Friday as well, Dave. Yeah.
Exactly, as long as you possibly can, you'll get your conditions.
No,
Willie looks horrified at the thought of going 3 miles, didn't he, when he was interviewed by Nichols, I think, on Racing TV on the Sunday?
Look how I was appalled. The suggestion seemed to appall him, didn't it? It was all fueled by Fanberry, who was also backed him Albert Bartlett only, who was trying to plant the seed, but it was tossed to one side. But anyway, the good guys will get their day one day, I'm quite sure. Ballyburn, DJ, I'm going to start with you on Ballyburn. He came to Kempton at Christmas. He then stepped up in trip at the DRF. Did you see enough there to suggest he isn't one to take on in the Brown Advisory?
I'm a little bit on the fence with him at the moment. I'm not convinced he's definitely a thorough stayer and 3 miles will suit. And he just sort of tend to go pretty freely, doesn't he? And I just wonder if his strength at the finish the other day was a little bit over-egged by Croke Park not being a thorough stayer himself. So I don't know. I really got loads of time for Ballyburn. I think he's a horse of serious potential, obviously, but it's just a shame that they got rid of that Turners.
Oh, that's where Madra would be running. We wouldn't even have Madra in the Arkle.
No, he might have had him. They wouldn't run him and Ballyburn, would they, in the 2.5? I mean, they'd have to keep those two apart. But GC, where were you with Ballyburn? Is there a weight of evidence to suggest it's banker material to you?
Take you way back to a bumper at Punchestown. April 2023, Ballyburn won it. Dancing City was second and Slade Steel was third. That was a handy bumper. I'm a massive fan of Dancing City, but I would prefer it to be soft to heavy. I think he's just an admirable horse. He got better and better over hurdles. His technique over hurdles was always a little too high and careful to get the very best out of him, but he excelled at 3 festivals. And I think he's made a very bright start over fences. But you look at the Willie Quotes, lads. He's a 4-wheel drive. He's lazy as sin. But I do think this is the exactly right race for him. And on good to soft ground, I think Ballyburn would have his hands full over more than 3 miles at Cheltenham. I'll wait on the ground. I'm a Ballyburn fan. I think he's a tremendous athlete. And I do think he'll stay the trip. He was so strong close home at Leopardstown. But if there was giving the ground, I'd be mighty keen to sort of have a really strong place bet on Dancing City and maybe a bit to win as well. Croke Park's in there. Billy can tell us about Better Days Ahead and Stella Story. I would have been filthy if I'd backed Stella Story at Navan last time. I would have been filthy. You talk about horses, who might have won, who didn't win. And there's another horse I'd value Billy's opinion on. If it is going to get dried up, Henry horse, who's not been seen for ages, called Gorgeous Tom, who's a big price at the moment. But if it turned into a proper spring ground festival, he'd be very well suited by it. What do you think, Billy?
I wouldn't disagree. Gorgeous Tom was probably unlucky not to win the Drinmore at Fairyhouse last time. He was rattling home at the end of it. That was over 2.5, but he had done his winning during the early part of the season. So yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think he's certainly a horse on the up, and like you said, he's probably been forgotten a small bit Totally agree with you about Stellar Story. Absolutely should have beaten Better Days Ahead at Navan the last day. But both of them will struggle to match Ballyburn, in my opinion. I think Ballyburn is a class apart. I wouldn't be too concerned about him getting the trip, to be honest. He's absolutely bred to get it. If you want to have a look back at the day he won his point to point, he came from no man's land to win a point to point and was flying home at the finish. I just think he's a class apart. And I think Willie's got a really strong hand in this race. He could run up to 5 in this. He's got Dancing City, he's got Lecky Watson, he's got Key de Bourbon, high class hero. But there's absolutely no doubt who the number 1 in the race is. They're all about Ballyburn. I think he'll get the trip and I think he'll win.
At Gambling, John Bon, Champion Chase, British Banker.
I actually agree, and I think I'm going to have to go after this one, Order. You'll be pleased to hear. He's the one that could be backable on the day, John Bon. Don't do anything now, because I think it's going to be the wise one to take on. I think a lot of people are going to want to take on John Bon with him not having won the big one at Cheltenham, with his Cheltenham record, and hopefully that'll play into John Bon fans' hands, because I think he'll win. And Nick, I've said this so much about this in the past. Nico de Boinville's the key to this horse. As long as Nico's there on Champion Chase Day, I think he's much the best in a weak division, really.
And thank you. I'll let you depart safely to your meeting with the Cheltenham Bigwigs. I probably shouldn't reveal that, but yeah, Prestbury Park, and we'll see you next week.
I hope it's not venison. I hope it's not venison stew.
Well, I hope it honestly was lovely.
Leftovers from yesterday.
That's very true. I think it will be thoroughly reheated if it is. GC, if we talked about John Bon, the argument that people are putting up is he isn't the same horse at Cheltenham as he is away from Prestbury Park. Is there any evidence for that for you?
I can't find it. I think it's high up on my list of crackpot theories that are going around. Sometimes you just say, I don't really like the price, so I'm going for X instead. But I just don't believe that holds water. And in terms of, from a fan point of view, the horse doesn't care either way. But in terms of wanting a horse to win one of the big ones, I would really like for him to win, because he is, A, he's very good, B, he's been super consistent, and C, he's been industrious, Dave. I think he has run more in the last 3 seasons than any of the other cracks. I stand to be corrected on that, but he's been a little bit busier than the vast majority of the stars. So I think he can win, but I don't think it's a cakewalk, and I think it's fiery because of Solness and Matata, possibly 1 or 2 others. I don't know whether El Fabiolo will run, but it's only 2 runs since he started 2 to 9 for this race last year. Energumene, if it was a bog, that seems unlikely. Gaelic Warrior, interested to hear what the lads think, but I don't know what to make of him at the moment. I'm dead against Solness. I don't think you can park him out in lane 8 like they've been doing at Leopardstown and hope to thrive at Cheltenham. And then we've got Marine Nationale and a couple of long shots. But no, I'm not in a mood to oppose John Bon, A, because he's got the best recent form in the race, and B, because I just like him to win this time around.
There's definitely that element to this, isn't there? I think you feel John Bon will be a thoroughly deserved champion in the Champion Chase.
Yeah, he absolutely would. It's hard to believe that a horse has done everything that he's done and he's still to win at the Cheltenham Festival. He had the misfortune, obviously, to run into Constitution Hill in the Novice Hurdle, and El Fabiolo was very much on a going day in the Arkle, and he had obviously the issue with the stable last year. So he's not always had Lady Luck on his side, and he's shown more than enough to suggest that he'd be a worthy winner, even if, like GC says, I don't think it'll necessarily be a cakewalk, because there's a few others that you couldn't necessarily rely on in the same way as you can John Bon, but they're not a million miles behind him in terms of ability, that if they're on a going day, they could just put it all together and make him really have a battle on his hands. But I hope he wins, because he does deserve it.
We're running out of time, and I'm going to bowl two for the price of 1 at you. Factifile in the Ryanair, Tiapu in the Stayers, yay or nay?
Factifile in the Ryanair, I think yay. I certainly, no, it's not absolutely certain he's going to run in the race yet, but if he turns up in it, yes, he'll be up against the likes of Protectorat and whatever, but I do think he's going to be the one to beat in that. Tehupo is a horse I really want to take on in the Stayers Hurdle. Certainly if the ground comes up dry, I'd be very inclined to take him on. I think he's really short, Ardy. If you look back at the race last year, he beat a whole pile of veterans. It wasn't a strong division, but it's not much stronger this year. There are a couple, the likes of Lucky Place, maybe Rocky's Diamond, that are emerging in that division. I'm just not sure where we are with Tehupo. He got beaten in the Hatton's Grace. We haven't seen him since. If the ground does dry out, he's too short for me. I'd be happy to take him on.
We see the Nichols running the shop, bidding for third successive Poodles Cheltenham Gold Cup. GC, you go first. Where are you with him?
Very hard to oppose. Don't be surprised if the Factor File Gold Cup conversation extends, if it stays dry. Don't be surprised if Factor File, wherever he goes, jumps quite sharply right early on. I think that's been a forgotten thing about his performance at Cheltenham last year. But no, I'm going to Gold Cup Day. I'm not working, but I can't not be there for a horse who's highly likely to win a third Gold Cup. And it's very difficult to find any flaws. Banbridge would be obviously well suited if it stayed dry. Factor File, we don't know where he's going to go. Grange Clare West is a horse who I think is coming good again at the right time. But no, it's a case of randomness, I think. You're looking for randomness to intervene if the shortest price favourite of the week is going to get turned over.
That's what it is. It's the shortest price of the week in the big race of the week. Are we expecting a combination? No, that's to you, DJ. Apologies.
Oh, apologies. Yeah, I think he's very hard to beat. He's seen, his CV is chock full of really good efforts, particularly at Cheltenham, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to give his running again under these conditions. And just having a quick look at the time form ratings, he's likely to be £9 clear of Banbridge, and then I think there's another £6 back to Grange Clare West in terms of who's likely to take him on. And it's just going to be very, very difficult to beat. And like GC says, you're looking for things out of the ordinary to get him beat, I think.
Final word to you on this week's podcast. Willie Mullins said it'd be his finest achievement, his finest trade now if Galloping the Shop was to win him a third Gold Cup. It matters a lot. Is he going to get that moment, do you think?
I think he is. I like the others. I find it impossible to oppose him. I just can't see what's going to beat him unless something unforeseen happens. He's the best horse in the race and he just keeps on turning up and doing it. So fingers crossed. GC said he'd love to see John Bond win the champion chase. Well, I'd love to see Galloping the Shop win 3 Gold Cups because I think he deserves it.
Just for the record, Arkle, when he won his third, was 10-1 on in a small field and won it by a fence. The best mate went for his third. He was 8-11 and he scrambled home by half a length from Sir Rembrandt. So it's not always quite as plain sailing as the script suggests.
That day very well. Who joined us earlier, well, he only just dropped off at the end. So the vast majority. The GC to Billy and David. We'll be back recording in person next week. It's not on Zoom. We're joined by Patrick Mullins to take a look ahead to Cheltenham. We'll only be a week out then. We'll get the inside track on some of the close-up horses. Any ones you want to ask about, get in touch, comment on the YouTube video. We'll ask Patrick about any horses that you want him to be quizzed on next week. But before then, thank you very much for listening.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.